Can you build a no-code app in 1 month? This is a question I get a lot. And honestly, it's a misunderstanding I get a lot because when non-technical entrepreneurs step into the app space and they start using no-code tools to build and launch their apps, a lot of times the reality of how long it's going to take them does not match up with their expectations. And of course, that's not a problem you want to run into because it can really throw off your development plans and strategy. It can push back your launch. It can force you to unintentionally set the wrong expectations with your own users and just cause a lot of negative ripple effects that you don't want to experience. And so today we're going to kind of do a reality check of how long it should actually take to build a no-code app. Now, make sure you stick around until the end because we're also going to talk about how this applies to the different stages of your development, because a prototype is certainly not the same as an MVP or a minimum viable product. And an MVP is certainly not the same as a full scope app either. And so to really answer this question for yourself, you also have to understand what it is you're building in the first place. So stick around until the end so you can get the full context on this. Now, first, if you're new around here, my name is Kristen, and I'm the co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps, where we help non-technical entrepreneurs build apps so they can launch their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses, all without coding. So, can you build your no-code app in 1 month? Let's dive right in. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to jump over to the whiteboard here so we can go through this. So you can see here, I have kind of like a ladder on my screen. And what we're going to do is put the different phases of development that you could potentially go through at different rungs on this ladder, kind of like we're climbing up it. So at the very bottom here, we're going to look at prototypes. Okay, and we're going to talk about what these are, how long they might take. We're going to look at MVPs above that, so minimum viable products. We're going to look at MMPs, minimum marketable products, and MLPs, minimum lovable products. And again, we'll talk about what these are. And we're going to look at full scope apps, so more fleshed out apps with the majority of the features that you initially have in mind for your application. So starting at prototypes, moving up to MVPs, then MMPs or MLPs, and then your full scope app. So the big overarching question throughout all of this is, of course, can I build my app in a month? And so we're going to answer that for each of these rungs, but we're also going to go into more detail so you can understand realistically what it would look like to build something like this. So with a prototype, if you are building a prototype, you are creating something with limited or no functionality. Okay, a prototype is really just for demo purposes. So if you are building an app or let's say you have an app idea and you need to validate that idea, you don't have any existing validation, you might decide to build a prototype, which is really just a product that conveys your app idea. So not necessarily a functioning product. Maybe it has some very limited functionality. You can click around in it, but you can't actually use it as an application. It's really just a demo of what your application might look like. And with prototypes, you can take these to your target market. You can take these to partners even. You can use these to convey your app idea so that people can better understand it, so that you can get the validation or maybe the partnership or even maybe the funding that you need to actually move into building your product. So this is very much for demo purposes. Now we're going to come back and talk about how this fits into the 1 month question of can you build an app in 1 month? But first, we're going to move up the ladder and we're going to talk about MVPs. So a minimum viable product. Now, this is where you actually do have a functioning product. So you're building a functioning product, but this is the most slimmed down version of your product. So it's a slim working product, right? And with an MVP, you are primarily testing you're testing for product validation. So with prototypes, you're testing for idea validation. With an MVP, now let's say you have that baseline level of validation you need to actually start building a functioning application. Well, even though you have validation for your app idea, you don't yet have validation for how that product might fit into someone's processes, might fit into a business or someone's personal life. So you know that there's a need for this solution, but you don't know the best way of how to apply the solution just yet. So you need to build out a working product so that you can start testing that and getting feedback on, does this product actually solve the problem in the way I had anticipated? Okay, so you're looking at product testing over here. So not just demo, but actual product testing. Okay, and again, we'll come back to the time frame, but we're going to move up the ladder first and talk about MMPs or MLPs. Now, you might not have heard of these acronyms or these terms before. An MMP is a minimum marketable product, and MLP is a minimum lovable product. Now, from what I've found in working with hundreds of non-technical entrepreneurs who are building apps, a lot of times they think they are building an MVP, but in reality, what they are building is an MMP or an MLP. An MVP is not necessarily the thing that you are going to put out onto the market and start monetizing right away. An MVP is very much something you're using for product testing. But a lot of people think they're building an MVP. They label their app with that term, but their intention is to go out and start, making thousands and thousands of dollars per month with it, or immediately growing the user base and scaling up from there. So if that's really your intention, or if that's what your feature set would enable, you're really building an MMP or an MLP. So something that is still a minimum product in terms of the features, but it has enough to where it's marketable. You could put a price tag on it and start charging users for it, or it's lovable. In other words, people can adopt it into their processes. So this is a slim, but it's an adoptable working product. And that's the key there, is the word adoptable, whereas with an MVP, this is not necessarily an adoptable product, it's just a slim working product. So with the MLP or the MMP, we're looking at adoption testing. Okay. So hopefully you can start to take what you have in your head or what you've already started to build right now, and you can put it at one of these rungs on the ladder to see what it is you're actually building. Because again, if you don't actually know what you're building, and it's understandable not to, because there are tons of labels and terms, but if you are thinking you're at one rung on this ladder, but in reality, the product you're building is on a different rung, then right there is an easy answer to the question of, can I build this in a month? Probably not, because you're not actually building what it is you think you're building. Okay, so start to place yourself somewhere on this. Now, a full scope app, this is straightforward, right? We're really looking at an expanded app here. And this is where we focus on growth, right? You're still getting feedback from your users. You're still testing. You should never stop testing. But now you're really just focused on growth. What is going to help this scale versus, down here, what's going to help validate my idea? Down here, what's going to help validate my product? Up here, what's going to help validate how to make this app adoptable? When we get up to the full scope app, we're looking at what's going to now scale everything that I have validated and tested. Okay, so different rungs here. Now let's go back to the question of, can I build my app in a month? So first things first, put yourself somewhere on this rung. Realistically, what is it that you are building? Okay, if you are building, let me change my highlighter here. If you're building a prototype, yes, you could build this in a month. Now, I'm not saying yes, every single person can build it in a month, because keep in mind that every app is going to be different. But also keep in mind the purposes of a prototype. You're not really building functionality. If you are, it's incredibly limited, and you're just conveying your idea. So with a prototype, yes, you could build this in a month. You could build it in a lot less even. I mean, realistically, you could build this almost immediately if you wanted to use a template. All right. Now, there are lots of templates that you can use on lots of no-code app development platforms. One thing to keep in mind is also which platform you're using as well. And we'll get into this in a minute. We'll come back to it. But most no-code app development platforms will offer templates of some sort. And these are templates for common types of apps, marketplace templates, dashboard templates, things like that, where you can just switch out the design. You can, put in your own copy, your own wording, things like that, again, just to convey your idea. If you can find a template that matches up with your idea and you don't really need to put any functionality into it that's custom yet, because with a prototype, you shouldn't have to. I mean, you can grab a template and demonstrate your idea if you are at that very first level of needing to validate your idea. So yeah, you could certainly build something like that in a month. Now, moving up the ladder, can you build an MVP in a month? Now, with this one, there are a few more caveats. I would say probably not, unless you are only building 1 to 2 features, right? Like 1 to 2 primary features at most. Now, going back to the different types of platforms you could be using. And really this ties into what type of app you're building as well. If you're building a really complex application and those 1 to 2 features that you're building are incredibly customized and just require a lot of work and care and thought and time, then you're not going to be able to build that in a month. I mean, maybe you could, obviously, if you're spending full time on it. It depends on, are you learning the platform you're using for the first time? I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. But unless you're building a true MVP that is really slimmed down and just has the bare bones features, and you are testing for 1 to 2 features, you're probably not going to be able to build it in 1 month. I think that, and this is where I see the most misunderstanding, because you're using no-code tools, and I think that the assumption is if there's no coding, then it's going to be easy. But, this is where, just to kind of sidetrack a little bit, this is where you also need to start looking at a spectrum of the type of app that you're building. Is it somewhat cookie cutter? That's my technical term here. Or is it really complex and customized? You can probably gauge this on your own without me having to break down what cookie cutter and complex means. But if you are way over here on the left and your app is just pretty standard, there's, not all that much complexity or customization, then it's naturally, obviously, not going to take you as much time to build. You're probably going to be able to use a platform that has more templates. And even though we talked about templates as being used for prototypes, if your app doesn't need that much customization, you can probably find a platform that will provide a template that just does most of the work for you. Again, if you don't really need any customization, you just want to kind of go with the functionality that's already there, that can happen pretty quickly. But if you're over on the right side of this spectrum and your app is more complex, you need to create your own customizations, then a template isn't going to do it for you. And it's going to take you longer. So I'm going to say in this section, probably not. I know that's not a hard answer, but hopefully it gives you a really good idea of sort of what to expect there. Now, moving up, MMPs, MLPs. Now, remember, this is what most people are actually building when they think they're building an MVP. And a lot of times when people are thinking they're building prototypes, they're really building an MVP. So we kind of unintentionally put ourselves a rung up. But with an MMP, MLP, I'm going to say no, unless you have existing skills. And what I mean by that is, have you launched a no-code app before? Do you know what the development process is like? Do you know what tools you want to use? Do you know how to use them already? Do you know how to correctly scope your app? Do you know how to stay on scope? Do you know how to build the type of customizations you already want? Or do you have a good idea because you have an existing skill set? Okay, this is the rung of the ladder where there's more of a hard line. You're probably not going to be able to build an MVP in 1 month. Even if you are hyper-focused, you're following the right path, you're doing everything right, it's usually still going to take a few months if you're brand new into this. It shouldn't take longer. It usually ends up taking longer. So that's another caveat here that I haven't touched on, but most of the time, again, because no code is often just assumed to be really easy, people come in with the wrong expectations, but no code is just the tool, right? Using a no code platform, it's just using the tool. There's so much more that's involved in building an app, right? Just because you know how to swing a hammer does not mean you know how to build a house, right? Kind of the same thing in a way. Hopefully you see where I'm going with this, but when we get up to this rung of the ladder with the MMP, the MLP, no, you're not going to be able to build that in a month unless you have existing skills. If you have help, for example, we help entrepreneurs go from idea to having the first version of their app that's scalable, something they're going to build on top of and grow. That should take a few months, right? If you have all the help, all the right pieces in place that are really propelling you forward. If you're coming into it and you're kind of tinkering, you're going the 100% DIY route, it's certainly going to take you longer, but building it in less than a month, I'm going to put just a definitive no on that. And then that, of course, will make this next rung pretty easy. Building a full scope app in a month, again, no, because of, or with the caveat of, unless you have existing skills. If you don't care about quality, then maybe, but at least for the people who we work with, they do care about quality because they want to build a foundation of their app that, again, they can grow on top of, versus building an app that they then have to go back and rebuild after they bring users on board. So this, it applies across the board. If you don't care about quality with your app, it's kind of like, you can look at a spectrum like we talked about before as well. The lower the quality, then the faster you're going to be able to build it, obviously. So you have to kind of keep these other things in mind as well. So I'm not giving you a hard answer of, this type of app is going to take this many days or weeks, because that's literally impossible to do. There are so many factors involved. Do you have any existing skills with the tool you're using? Do you have any existing skills with creating development plans and strategies? Do you have any existing skills with project management or product management? Do you have any existing skills as it relates to launching an app? I mean, what you bring to this is going to make a big difference. How well planned out is your development roadmap? Have you split the different phases of your development up in the right way, right? All of this applies to this question, or in answering this question. All of these things are different factors. How much is your budget? Do you want to spend some money to speed up the time frame? Right? You can pay for a shorter amount of time, certainly. If you are, like I said before, if you're kind of tinkering, just trying to figure things out on your own, it's going to take you longer no matter what. Are you going to build something in a month if you're coming in with no skills and you're just kind of tinkering around? No, I don't see that, unless the quality doesn't matter, the functionality doesn't really matter. Maybe you really are just building a prototype, right? So keep all of these things in mind, but this should give you a guideline. Now, in saying all of this, I'm not trying to convince you that it takes a really long time to build your app. I don't want you to go that way either, right? But you need to find a middle ground. There needs to be a balance. You can build an application very quickly. In a month, not if it's a business that you're launching and growing, no, but you can create it quickly if you have the right processes, if you have the right help, if you have the right plan, strategy, roadmap, all of these things. It can also take you a heck of a lot longer if you are just figuring things out as you go and just kind of bouncing around from one thing to the other. It can take you a lot longer. So it really, we're spanning across the whole spectrum here. You can build it quickly. You have to keep these things in mind. You have to know what you're building, set the right expectations for what you're building, and set a deadline, because once you do, then you can put the pieces in place that will enable you to get there. All right, I'm going to leave it there. I hope this is helpful. We dug into this a lot. I hope this helps you set the right expectations. You can launch very quickly with no code tools, but you have to be realistic about it. So know what you're doing, know what you want, right? Put the plan in place, and you can create a product that helps you achieve each goal on every rung of this ladder, and it ultimately helps you climb the ladder until you are in that upper growth stage. All right, again, I hope this was helpful. Now, if you are starting out with your app right now, or if you are wanting to get started, if you're in the early stages, we have a workshop where we take you really in depth, step by step, through a lot of this initial planning to make sure that you really are building the right things at the right time, that you're on track for a faster development and an earlier launch. So you can join in on that for free if you head to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. We'll hope to see you there. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.